Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is, wherever you are, welcome. This is our first She Leads AI Live, where we are coming to you with our fantastic experts in our She Leads AI Society who bring a breadth of expertise from different industries, oftentimes 20 to 30 years of subject matter expertise in their field. And then we add AI to it and we are super women. So we love to take the opportunity to share some of our knowledge and ideally rapidly transfer that to the people who join our lives. So welcome, we're delighted you're here. Feel free throughout our time together today to drop comments, questions, shout outs. We'd love to hear from folks. I'm most closely monitoring the comments on LinkedIn, but do feel free if you're over on our YouTube channel, which is She Leads AI, feel free to drop comments in there. I'm pretty sure I see them. And let me introduce myself for a second. And again, welcome everybody. We've got 9 people here so far. I'm delighted to see you. My name is Ann Murphy. I am the founder of She Leads AI, which our mission is to unite accomplished women to advance AI for global prosperity. And in the quest to do so, we are set up as follows. We have the She Leads AI Society, which is our private community where we gather. We are hosted on Mighty Networks. We gather to talk about AI in the news, AI use cases. If we get stuck, we get ourselves unstuck together. We have a channel for posting pictures of our furry friends, a channel for business development. So that's how we stay in contact with each other 24/7. And then we have tons of member-led learning inside the She Leads AI Society, which is the best learning in AI. We're incredibly generous, and the women who are here today, you'll see we're extremely generous in sharing our expertise, sharing our knowledge, our examples, because in the AI era, there are so few benchmarks. It's not like it's going to come from somewhere else. It's going to come from your friends inside communities. And that's how we all are leveling up as fast as possible. We also talk about the perils of AI. Of course, we're all very interested in responsible AI and the impact on people, process, and culture. Speaking of which, today we're going to talk about leadership, top-down leadership versus leading with empathy. And you're going to hear some examples of both, what works better, what works not quite as well, and some of the reasons why top-down leadership doesn't work in the AI era. We'll also talk about how we can do better in terms of leading across the organization versus hierarchical. And we'll talk about the how we support our champions and how we navigate those who aren't ready to bring AI into their lives. So please feel free. I'm going to just make sure that I am accessing my comments really quickly, and I don't think I am. Where are they? Chat. Great. Oh, Deborah, everything is in Slack. So you'll need to go over there. And we've actually started already. So welcome. Here's what I wanted to say to kind of set the stage. The AI era presents an opportunity always for us to break what's already broken. So much of what we've experienced from leaders inside our organizations, leaders in our society, corporate, education, nonprofit, government, we've seen the impact of poor leadership or leadership that just wasn't, leadership skills that weren't developed. We've been part of, a couple decades of seeing women and men and all genders be promoted slightly beyond their skill set which is cool, right? You've got individual contributors inside organizations who are crushing it, which is like dream, right? We want those individual contributors to be, you know, carrying the water. Oftentimes those folks get promoted to manager, director, you know, a leadership role in the organization. And unfortunately, what's happened in certainly our generation is that these folks did not get a lot of support for leadership development. Our role models were, you know, the CEOs when we got into our, you know, careers, oftentimes a leadership style that doesn't really transfer to today's day and age. And so we've got a lot of Gen X leaders who don't know how to build psychological safety in teams, who don't know how to do like high stakes communication with stakeholders, who don't know how to do training for adult learners, right? So we have a leadership gap, and our goal today is to help inspire folks to develop maybe really quickly leadership skills that are going to be very, that will be, you know, critical in the AI era. And also we're going to give you some examples to keep an eye out for. So with that, I'm going to bring my esteemed colleagues on screen, and we will begin our conversation about leading with empathy. So let me bring everybody on, like I just said I was going to do. There we go. Awesome. All right. Greetings, everybody. How you doing?
Hi.
Say hi to the nice people. All right. So thank you. Sorry, I'm just getting coffee here. Thank you. Okay. So Valerie, we're going to start with you, and I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about why top-down leadership is particularly ineffective when implementing AI across the board.
Sure, thanks. Hi.
Introduce yourself. Sorry.
Yeah, I figured.
Let's do intros, actually. Let's do a round of intros. Valerie, you let us know who you are and what you're all about. We'll go to Dawn and then Marn, and then we'll dive into questions. Sorry about that.
Sounds good. No worries. Hi, I'm Valerie Ehrlich, and I'm a consultant in the AI space, primarily focusing on nonprofits and foundations and their implementation of responsible AI. And I have a background in human development and spent 10 years at the Center for Creative Leadership, 8 years, sorry. And so that's why this topic is near and dear to my heart.
Awesome. Dawn, the Cyber Dawn.
Hi, everyone. I'm 𝗺𝘵𝘶 in Chicago. I'm an AI and cybersecurity. I help law firms, small businesses, and nonprofits adopt AI, and I assist women advance through AI readiness, which is one of Anne's missions as well. With over experience in emerging risk management, I advise business leaders at the intersection of law, cybersecurity.
Nicely done, Dawn. I love your smooth, silky smooth elevator pitch. I need to do that.
I'll write one for you.
Please do. Marn.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marn Finzer, and I'm joining you from my floating home in Seattle. And yes, I actually can paddle right out my back door. I get asked that all the time. I come from a background in marketing and branding, which eventually led me into the nonprofit world. I'm a high impact fundraiser right now, and I'm bringing AI into all of this and all my skills, and I'm having a blast.
Awesome. Wonderful. I should mention that we had a conversation like this recently at a summit for nonprofit advocacy. And then we retooled this a little bit for all sectors. So the four of us have talked about this a little bit, but today we're bringing information from like across industries. All right. So now, Valerie, why does top-down leadership not work in the AI era?
Well, top-down leadership is probably always a little bit of a challenge, but especially challenging with AI. And there's a few different reasons for that. So one is that given the scale and scope and the degree of access to this technology that people have, like previously, big tech innovations might come slowly to the general population. And so, it might just be the biggest organizations that could handle the expense, and the rollout might take time. And now everyone has this in their pocket, essentially, if they've got a phone. And so that fundamentally changes the nature of it. What's also really important is that top down changes how their relationship to the actual work that's being done. And so in terms of figuring out what AI is really good at doing and helping for your organization, the line of sight that you need to the day-to-day work is not going to be the same line of sight that the executive team probably has. I think one important thing to note is that it's not necessarily about doing bottom up leadership in this moment. I think it's really, a better term might be like strategic cross section. So the executive team has the resources and has the decision-making power, and they can sort of grease the wheels and make things happen. But having a cross section of roles and identities and ages and task types across the organization of people who are also at varying degrees of comfort with AI will really help sort of seed the organization to be more successful.
Absolutely. I agree. That AI is such a generalist technology,
Mm-hmm.
and that the C-suite in particular has such a different sightline on AI technology because they have such different use cases and oftentimes very, very specific. And typically they're not doing they don't have time to do the play first thing that folks who are, the boots on the ground or who have taken time away to learn AI skills and come back, they just don't have that same point of view. And the beauty of that is that it's this great moment to set aside our addiction to hierarchy and also the safety of being the decision maker, of not being as challenged and not having people, the intern is probably your best person on your AI council, right? But our C-suite wouldn't be accustomed to asking the intern for feedback. And now we get to do that. And so we have this beautiful excuse to break up the rock pile, which I love. Marn and Dawn, do you have anything that you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, I could chime in on that because the word that came to mind when I heard this question was culture, and who drives the culture. And when you think of sort of on what Valerie said, it's the senior and middle management people that are on the ground really instilling culture. And we saw this in cybersecurity as well at the board level versus with the boots on the ground, as you said, and this idea of investing in cyber resilience. And it's analogous now to investing in a culture of AI and in essence, AI resilience from a security standpoint, but also just AI adoption. And so does it normally instill culture? And that's a big part of this.
Absolutely. Marn, what have you seen?
I just agree with all of them. I think it is definitely happening at the bottom level. And I think I agree with Dawn. It is culture. That is huge. I think that sums it up all right there. People need to be safe, and we need to create that safe space for them to step in and explore and discover. And yeah.
So that's a perfect segue to a question that I wanted to ask you, which is, what are you seeing with employees, or what are you learning, hearing, witnessing from other members in the society about employees flouting those hierarchies in a good way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bypassing the hierarchies.
I feel like all of the different organizations, businesses, it doesn't matter what industries. I see employees building their own AI ecosystems brick by brick. They are highly capable. They're deeply informed, but they're most of the time flying under the radar. You know, and I see some are excited and charging ahead. Some are scared and they're experimenting really quietly. But what I see most commonly is the way they're bypassing these in just very practical, everyday ways. They're all using ChatGPT to explore, write proposals, maybe summarize their meetings. I see people swapping prompts, ideas, and tools in group chats. I've seen people installing browser extensions and plugins, you know, excited what they've just discovered. And what I'm seeing a lot of is people learning independently through online courses and webinars, just like what we're here doing today. The point is they are not waiting. They're moving forward because they want to be effective. They want to stay relevant, and they want to be a part of what's next. And I feel like there's a little bit of tension without the structure or training. They may unknowingly be putting sensitive data at risk or creating downstream problems. And it's not about defiance, it's about momentum, right? And it's happening now. So I think for me, the main takeaway here in answer to this question is employees are not waiting, and leadership needs to see that. The most engaged employees are already, they're the leaders. And now leadership's job is to recognize it and support it.
Absolutely. We're going to talk about how we support our champions in a minute. But, you know, I was intrigued by a conversation recently about, or maybe this was oh my gosh, yes, I was, this was a LinkedIn post that I dove into yesterday. There was a woman who was interviewing a candidate, and in the interview, she asked a question from the candidate's materials, and the candidate said, actually, I think that showed up on my resume or on my cover letter because when I was applying for the job, I had ChatGPT review the job description. And so some of that language may have been brought in. It's something I'm very much looking forward to, but I haven't done that yet. And my take on that is, one, no AI first employee should work. I mean, the woman, sorry, let me back up. The woman who was the author of the post said she's a Luddite, right? So first takeaway is no AI first employee should go work for a Luddite. You just can't, because your career and your career growth is dependent on how you use AI going forward. You won't be able to get that next job if you are a knowledge worker, right? And your higher ups aren't empowering you to use AI. That is a huge red flag for your career. The other piece was how great it is to have that moment in the interview, not, you know, way down the road, to know we're just not for each other, right? Is it a gaffe to leave something in that you would have preferred to have left out? Absolutely. Are people applying for hundreds of jobs at once? Yes. I think we can give people, personally, I think we can give people some grace on that stuff. But it's interesting, the match between like the enterprise-wide policies, and then when you go down into the work groups, the importance that your work group is also embracing AI. So anyone, Dawn and Valerie, do you want to add anything to how people
I was gonna piggyback onto the resume comment, but that's kind of off track. But I heard somebody say something earlier today that, you know, the resumes of the future, you know how you list your employer and all the tasks you did, but really the resumes of the future to your story need to show what you can build with AI. It isn't just I did this. So in a way, you know, depending on how that was, she was using the tool in sort of a, you know, unexpected way, could actually help her. Maybe not with the Luddite, but the idea is that resumes of the future, you'll need to actually say, I've built this, I've done this, custom, proprietary, etc., which we haven't been seeing on resumes. But the bypassing of the hierarchy, there's two things. One is, you know, employee users. I've written about this, and so have you, Anne, this idea of objectors, tinkerers, and black belts.
Yes.
If you have black belt adopters, them, because they'll be gone in a heartbeat to a competitor. So this idea that we're going to hold true to hierarchy when you've got some whiz kid in there that can do what nobody else can do, you better find out, one, what it is, how you can nurture it, and how you can have them positively impact those that may be objectors or afraid to use what you spent a lot of money investing in.
Absolutely. Valerie, thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think in any sort of culture change, what you need is energy and momentum and motivation. And so where there are people who feel so compelled by the technology and see its relevance to the work, that are hopefully not necessarily bypassing, but who are doing stuff on their own, like that's the type of energy that you want to nurture in peer learning cultures, basically, so that they can help bring everyone else along through their energy and insight.
Absolutely. And this case
Oh, I
study
love that one.
with one of our members, which, let me know if I can say your name or not, maybe I can't, but I've been watching her journey for a few years. First, you know, in the AI salon, and, you know, watching her journey, you know, learning the same things along with her side by side, seeing where she was going to, you know, like begin outing herself, like she said, in her organization, and letting people know that she uses generative AI. And if I'm not mistaken, it started with first a few people asking her questions, and then she got called into a meeting with, you know, some of the more influential leaders. And sure enough, now she says she's in charge of AI implementation for her global corporate comms department. Like, if you're wondering whether people should know that you are the AI person, this is a use case for yes, they should know. And Kyle Shannon and I talked about this last night on the AI Readiness podcast. And what we were reflecting on is how often we hear that people make themselves known as the AI person. And when you know you're doing it right is when your friends and family stop being interested in talking to you. Because you're always talking about AI. And then when your friends and colleagues are like, oh dear, right, we're gonna, Anne's here, she's gonna ruin another party, we're gonna talk about AI. That's kind of when you're doing it right, because you need folks to know that you're into this, and you may be able to have some of the hard conversations with people that, you know, their boss is not going to have with them, right? Letting people be in a safe space with a peer is an incredibly helpful thing that you can do as somebody who is, you know, using AI. Okay. Oh, this is a good one, Valerie. And I think we'll have maybe a couple of people. What does empathy actually look like in the context of AI leadership? So we've put it out there that in this moment, with all of the super big feelings justified, right? Peril, promise, you know, the things we're excited about, the parade of horribles, we really have to show up differently in all of the spaces where we are, and particularly leaning into our for women's innate empathy as one of the tools in our leadership toolkit. So Valerie, can you talk a little bit about what that looks like when empathy is employed in these conversations?
Sure. So just in terms of level setting, like definition of empathy, what do we mean by empathy? I use CCL's definition, not surprisingly. It is the ability to understand and relate to the thoughts, feelings, and experiences of others. And to do so with understanding and supporting with compassion. So there's a lot of things in there that are opportunities for how we show up. And so I was going to highlight quickly sort of 4 key ways that I think this shows up. One is, given all of the unknowns in terms of both how AI works, how it's going to be used, and what it ultimately means for us as humans, seeing resistance not as defiance, but as rooted in values and recognition of the uncertainty. And so how do you design in a way that both brings people in and allows people to feel like they can come into the room if they're feeling, unsure and skeptical? And so that relates to the second one, which is building psychological safety. And, leaders can do this by modeling vulnerability, showing their own learning and experimentation. Like, this is relatively new. We're all doing new things with it. We're all figuring it out. The one important thing that I've seen with psych safety is it's not something you can mandate. Like, if there's a gap where people don't feel like they can show up and feel safe, then just saying that we want psych safety is not gonna work. So it's something that's gonna have to be built. So just be mindful if you're like, but I tell people they can, tell me how they're really feeling. And if they're not, then there's a gap there. The third is really centering values and equity and in all of our decisions around AI. So just when we're thinking about any level of implementation or decision, like, who's in the decision room? Who's valued in this decision, or whose voice has been heard or not heard as related to it? Who stands to benefit or not? And making sure that we're really bringing in the range of experiences. And then the last one is really focusing on mindsets. I think a lot of times, especially with tech, we think about skill sets and like upskilling. But really, this is a huge culture change and a culture shift. And so it's mindsets and helping people connect back to the purpose of their work and really doing this in a way that builds trust alongside the innovation and the change versus going so quickly. Moving fast and breaking things doesn't go so well with humans. And so I think that's what empathy is really about.
Oh my gosh, I love that. You're so right. Like, the mindset piece is everything. And it can be really, really challenging to address the mindset in this realm in particular, because some of it is very deep-seated fears, hopes, dreams, worries, moral positions around AI. I recall, like, a year ago, I was having a conversation with the head of an IT department, and they said, well, here's the thing. I personally am morally opposed to AI. I don't want to have anything to do with it. I don't want to advocate for it. I'm more worried about the downside than the upside, but this is my job. And my heart kind of broke for them, because they're right. Like, that is their position description, right? They are going to, in this case, they had, the IT department has had a really strong role in the rollout. It's the expectation that they do so, yet I know they're going to be carrying around this, like, their heart is going to hurt while they're doing it. And I think a lot of our colleagues are going to be in those situations. Like, because we're in the AI bubble, we mostly know people who are optimists, or who are, like, maybe optimist, pessimist, like the passive kind of pessimist that sets expectations really, really fairly. And then anything that happens above that is bonus. But externally, outside that bubble, there are still so many people who are really navigating based on the headlines. And the headlines are what they're always going to be, right? Like, I remember watching one of the first, I don't know, this might have been like the OG fear tactic, night, evening news. And it was how to not get mauled at the mall. And it was about escalators. in that moment, I mean, I was like a teenager or whatever, but I was like, oh no, this is the kind of stuff we're going to be talking about going forward. And sure enough, all these years later, most of our headlines are the downside of AI. So here we are. Marn and Dawn, thoughts on it?
I loved
Go ahead, Marn.
Oh, I loved your explanation, Valerie, and just one little thing, and then it's all yours, Dawn. I was thinking you said culture change, mindset change. Absolutely. I think the key word I see, behavioral change. It's all kind of the same, but I remember it really is, you have to train yourself to think in these new ways, and you have to start with such baby steps. The very beginning, someone said, put a Post-it note on your computer, and every time you go to Google something or research something, have you asked GPT, is what the note says. So you'd retrain yourself to go there instead of Google. And it works. And then now you just think, maybe you started once a day, twice a day, and then you'd think, oh, that was fun. Now, look at us. How many times a day do we go into ChatGPT? And I was just telling someone the other day, how could I get my job done without it? I don't know how I did it. All the things it helps me with. So I think behavioral change is such a key point of this.
Yes, absolutely. Dawn.
Yeah, one other point I don't think we've touched on yet, I agree with both, and that is this idea of active listening, because there's a communication factor in all of this. And if you're in an environment where active listening was not practiced between like the hierarchy within the company, this is a time where you have to actively listen to what's happening, to be empathetic, and then pivot and adjust your strategies accordingly. And so I think that's a factor that comes into the bullet list that Valerie mentioned, and also to the behavior that Marn mentioned. And for active listening, find out what the users are saying, feeling, doing. Don't be in, happening. Listen.
That's so key. And if people are wondering about how to do active listening, because it's not, especially Americans, like our version of listening is often just waiting to speak, that you could go to ChatGPT and get some really, really good tips on questions to ask and how to demonstrate active listening. The biggest part, of course, is going to be like the work that you put into it. Active listening is emotionally more taxing than just sitting around waiting to talk. So ask ChatGPT. This is a perfect example of, preparing for a conversation. Ask for some key questions that you can ask, like, is there more, right? If you were going to say one more thing, what would it be? I understand where you're coming from. Can you tell me more? Those kind of questions that just help draw the thoughts and feelings out of somebody. In part, it's actually just good business, because this is risk management. So when you're creating an environment where your colleagues can openly share their concerns, now you can address them, right? And some of those concerns, when they go unaddressed, will mean, that privacy and confidentiality is at risk, right? Transparency and explainability, policies, governance, like that's what's at stake here. So creating that space and doing active listening and asking good questions is just, good business nowadays. Always, but particularly now. Okay. Well, there we go. Let's share some thoughts on how do we create an environment where employees feel safe voicing concerns about AI. So we said a little bit about active listening, but other thoughts on how we actually do that? How do we create an environment where employees feel safe voicing concerns? Thoughts?
I think you have, you need to have somebody who's responsible. If it's a small enterprise, a startup, whatever it might be, you need to have somebody who's going to really take the information in and then share it. Fear will keep people from speaking and from using, but also FOMO then is tied into that. Well, if I don't use it, so you get this cycle of fear, fear, fear. And if somebody doesn't know that they can voice something to someone,
Yeah.
And certainly not necessarily somebody in HR, but somebody who's a point person in the firm
Right.
that you assign, whether it's a council or a single person, to say, you're going to take in the information and we'll troubleshoot from there. Because there are going to be a ton of questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Maren and Valerie, other thoughts?
Yeah, I can offer, again, this is a culture change. And when we're doing this type of work, we know a lot from previous things, like how we might be doing diversity, equity, and inclusion culture change, like giving people multiple ways to provide feedback that are anonymous is also really important. So, and especially with tools like Miro and Mural and Jamboard before it was gone, there are ways to collect that information in low stakes ways, which I think is especially important, especially if people have real fear and concerns. But I would say the second half of the equation that kind of makes or breaks if these voices will continue to feel, if people will feel safe enough to share, is going to be what you do with the information. So if we get critical feedback and it's not responded to, then there's not, people aren't going to keep offering it up. Like the second half of listening is doing something about it. And so even if you're not necessarily going to change, or you can't actually do what it is they're hoping, being clear that it was heard and it was considered in this way and that, and what sorts of things you might be able to do, if there are concerns about different models or how they're trained, or where there's bias, like saying what it is you're doing to mitigate those things or address those things is really important. Like I have seen feedback go and then just be heard but not acted on, and it doesn't really feel heard when that happens.
Absolutely. Other Maren thoughts?
Just on top of that, yes, Valerie, I so agree with that. And I've seen that happen a lot. And then, not that this is ideal, but at least if you had to start with nothing else, maybe let it happen organically and be that safe person. Like the gal that said she was a closet AI, enthusiast or what leader. Be that person. Just be the one that will step in and listen, and be that safe person. And maybe that conversation can start something. I mean, it has to start somewhere. And so many times it really does start at the ground up. So maybe, be that person. And then when they feel safe with you, encourage them to go do the same with somebody else. If you don't have those other tools in place, be that change.
I think one of the challenges with AI is that oftentimes the response to those questions is, we don't know. We don't know. We don't know. We haven't figured it out yet. The technology is still evolving. We don't know what the budget is. We don't have the pros and cons yet. We don't know what so-and-so is going to think or say or do. I cannot tell you how many times I've been in conversations where we're like pretty significantly down the road with a training program inside a company, and I find out that they're not entirely sure what model they're going to roll out after, as part of the training. Or I may even be part of the conversation about, typically it's a conversation around Copilot, Microsoft Copilot. Is Microsoft Copilot going to work? Are we going to be able to convince, to your point, Maren, convince the people who have built their AI ecosystem brick by brick, just exactly to their liking, right? And they're using it and they're getting all these benefits and they know how to tweak it when it stops working. Are we going to convince those people to migrate over to a tool that has a lot going for it, but can't do some of the things we're used to doing? That's a conversation that often we don't have enough information, even while we are building our skills and while we're sharing our questions and concerns. And I think it's like very unsatisfying for a leader to have to say sometimes, I don't know. And I actually don't know when we're going to know. But even that is an example of the transparency and the vulnerability that leadership requires in this era. For us to be able to say, like, I'm not this all-knowing leader. This is like so much bigger than us, right? This has to do with, NVIDIA and China and all of the frontier models. Like, this is, some of it's like way, way, way beyond our control, but certainly, in our organizations and at the work group level, we can create change. Okay, let me see. I'm kind of skipping around a little bit, but let's talk about vocal skeptics. How have you seen it be effective to engage those vocal skeptics? Because they can sometimes be our greatest allies, but also they can be like we talked about, some people have very deep-seated concerns.
Bring them on. I love a challenge. And I feel like this just, comes right from what we were just talking about. So many of the same things. When I see someone's a vocal skeptic, that honestly does just draw me in. I never try to convince them. I just want to understand them. So most of the time, they're not resisting the technology. It's the fear. And it's fear of change. It's what we've talked about. Fear of being left behind. Fear that they won't be able to learn it. They're really, really good at what they do. They have this history of leading the pack, and they're afraid they won't be able to catch on. So when I can make them feel comfortable enough to admit this, and I hear it again so much, they usually come back and say, I am just not a techie. And all I have to say is, neither am I. And they laugh. We both laugh because it is so true. It's like, if I can learn it, you can learn it. And once we can break that tension, a real conversation can begin. So it's curiosity. I lead with curiosity with those skeptics, and just start asking them simple questions. What is it exactly that concerns you? Or is there something that you're worried about that might replace you or change what you're doing? And I just get them to talk. And usually once they can open up and trust me enough to start talking, the shift can happen, because I'm not pitching anything. I'm there listening, and I might try to offer just a small, real win, simple, that worked for me. And I'll just say it in a very non-threatening way, like, hey, look, this saved me 30 minutes over here. It could be something so simple. And maybe it would do the same for you. So I think when they feel heard and they see if someone like me can do it and how easy and useful it can be, their curiosity takes over. And once I can get their curiosity, right, taking over, they're kind of on their way. So I think the important thing in summing all this up is, you don't need to think you need to change someone's mind. You just need to make them feel heard and safe, and spark enough curiosity that they'll take that first step. And with each little teeny baby step, I think the fear starts fading.
Marn, you could give a master class on this, because you have sorry, I'm moving my stand-up desk down, so it's I'm a moving target at the moment. You have had conversations about AI with people from all walks of life. Your neighbor in the kayak pulling up to your dock. I know this story. Like, when Marn told me a story, she was telling one of her neighbors about Grant, her AI, saying, "I'll go ask Grant," and the neighbor leaning in, going, "Well, who's this Grant you speak of?" One of our friends, Suzanne Welker-Juergens, she walks around, San Francisco with her phone and makes little images of things and asks people in coffee shops, "Have you used ChatGPT? Would you like me to make an image of your setting right here?" I think there are lots of ways to do that are non-threatening, but it's tempting to be like, well, you could get your job done a lot faster, or, well, it's coming anyway, it doesn't matter how you feel. I'm totally guilty of saying a nicer version of that, but not that much nicer. One of my friends this weekend told me, she's like, I feel really bad because we're dear friends and everything, but like, I am not really excited about AI. Can you tell me some things that might change my mind? And so I told her like some small things and some big things. And what I realized was, with some people, the inroad might be the things that we would say are probably like lighter, funner uses of AI, right? That are just relevant. I gave her an example of, I was talking with Sheila, my ChatGPT, about a movie. I wanted to watch a movie, but I can't ever pick a movie. Why it is that I can't pick a movie. She explained my psychology to me, and then recommended a few movies. We went back and forth, and then she recommended Paddington 2, which isn't a movie that I would typically watch, and gave me a viewing guide with some mantras, and at the end encouraged me to text a whole bunch of people that I care about and let them know I was thinking of them. That was such a better movie watching experience. I always just fall asleep. So I shared that with my friend, and she was like, okay, yeah, that's pretty cool, but is it more important or better? Or does it offset the environmental damage, right? That is part of the reality with AI. It's like, that one probably isn't gonna pass a sniff test. No. Let's see, other thoughts about making people, about working with the vocal skeptics.
I have another neighbor story. So it's funny that you talked about neighbors, because I had a neighbor that I dog sit her dog for, and she asked me, and she was a skeptic, and I said, well, come on in. And we sat at my computer, and I booted up ChatGPT and showed it to her, and then she wanted to know about terminology that would be like synonyms of HR director. And so we put in these prompts, and we ended up with like this 4-page that I emailed to her, and she was like, I can't even believe this. I had no idea. This is not a Google word. Powerful. So she was all thrilled, because she's going to now do some job apps and looking at job descriptions, and she do. And that was just one little smidge. One was a skeptic that said, no, I don't want to know it. Interacting with the people around us, it isn't always just a business aspect, but it's just bringing people on board to show them, hey, these are some things you can do to help you.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Dawn, that leads me to a question that I wanted to ask you to share about, which is, do you have any examples of where, having this type of a conversation where somebody feels safe to share their concerns, where it has caught an issue before it became a big problem?
Yes. So I had a really interesting and telling situation. I was advising a mid-professional services firm using GPT Teams, which if you have 2 or more people, which is paid. And so we were looking at how would you go about drafting client reports? That's one of the things they had to do, which they thought would lead to efficiency. And then in the training, I noticed that one of the junior employees, you could see. And so this is what I learned about asking like a poignant question. So I said, what's been working for you now, or up to now? And that moment of empathy of asking, what have you used this for? Or what has troubled you? Or it ended up that several team members were using their own paid GPT to speed things up in their work, not this team. And they were copying and pasting information into that tool, not this tool, right? And so ChatGPT Teams does have private, but they weren't even using that. It was like, we're we want to speed this up. We want to be good. We want to get, gold stars. So we're going to use our own version on our phone or what have you. And so the problem is, those weren't part of the company's security system. There's no audit trail. There's no tracking, no control. And it wasn't malicious. It was a workaround.
Yeah.
And so what I realized is, wow, people are using tools outside of the. So if someone clicked on a bad link or there was malware on their laptop, sensitive client data could be exposed, and then not because of hackers. This is not a cybersecurity attack. This is habit or behavior.
Yep.
And so empathy in that moment meant no blame or shame, which is a term that comes from cyber. It means listening without punishing and acting before a small risk becomes a big mess. And so that was a real lesson even for me.
Dawn, you're the perfect person to speak on this because of the fine line that you have to walk being a cybersecurity expert and trying to modify behavior, because the blame and shame, we know where that goes. And then, but also you can't be permissive and like enabling. So you got to like walk that fine line, I wanted.
And at that point, we stopped the rollout. I didn't mean to overtalk.
No.
Sorry.
Please go ahead.
The close of that, which was we stopped the rollout and some governance protocols, because obviously at that point they needed clarity. And that was just my wrap up statement I wanted to say on that. Stop the press.
Yeah.
And so that's where we got to that point. Just wanted to add that.
I love that. And I think that that's an approach for all of us to consider. So for a little while, I was successful in working with clients and saying at the beginning, we're going to do the governance, then I will do training if we need individual training. And because I wanted to, of course, protect us, right? And I'm on the board for fundraising AI, and I wanted to make sure that I wasn't, doing some of the wrong things myself, so I could work with the organization to set up their guidelines in advance. And that would still be my preference. What I learned, however, right, and this is just part of, the evolution of what it looks like to work with companies, is that the governance stuff is so boring and dry and fear-mongering-y. It goes into a place in their heads where it's just like, it's not juicy, it's not sexy, I'm getting no dopamine from this. And we're asking them to take on new skills. So what I learned was that it's very, very difficult to have a contract with a group if I am saying governance is first. So what we do now is we do training, but there's no go live of anything until we have also set up an AI council. So, and we can talk about that in a minute, what that is, but I always want to make sure that when I leave my work with that organization, they are all set to launch into an AI governance process to make sure that, like you're saying, Dawn, some of those things don't happen. We have 5 minutes. I want to squeeze in 2 more things. One is, let's see. Oh, champions. Valerie, can you talk about how we support our champions without just giving them tons more work?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I was just reading an article today about how champions might not be the way to go. So I'm rethinking a little bit more my champions idea. But I think what that article was talking about was that a challenge for like super users and people who are kind of further along in their AI path is to meet their peers where they are. And I know I have really felt that. But I would say I think there are some things that organizations can do. First and foremost is have the resources that you give your champions match the urgency and importance of the task. So if we're expecting, culture change and really for the champions to drive it, then what are the resources in your organization that are going to help that? And not just like tools, but like time. And does this become a part 20% of their role? What are we going to take off of their plate in order to enable them to do this work? And maybe not just asking that the gains that they're experiencing with AI, that they can now fit this in there, because that's not really how you move from learning to teaching others. It's not just pouring more into a full cup. Another thing I've seen work well is productive pairings in like peer education. So taking someone who's further along and pairing them with someone who is a newer user, but who's excited, and having them do peer education groups can be really helpful, because people can see different ways of approaching it. It doesn't just feel like, oh, I need to be an expert. And I think peer learning is really an overlooked tool in a lot of culture change. And one thing that peer learning can really do, just like what Dawn was sharing and what you've all shared, are these stories. Like, so often when we share a way that we're using it, it opens a door for someone else. And there was a quote, and I'm not going to remember who said it, but it was on a podcast around if you want to change culture, change stories. And I think we often overlook the power of the stories, the small stories of our everyday experiences, and how those are what's going to seed really the new narratives of what this technology looks like and is for us. And the last thing, which is more tactical, is give your champions guardrails. So whether it's a draft policy or a go-to website or a person that they can reach out to at any point, like give them maybe guardrails isn't the right term, but the sort of parameters and supports to support their leading others. But also give them access to like good tools. So when we're setting up an environment, a sandbox for people to play with AI in, make it a good one that people are going to want to use. Otherwise, if it's no good, they're going to use the one in their pocket again.
Yeah. With just a minute or two to go, I have a couple. I want to wrap this up in a bundle of recommending, and we should do a super practical session on this, but the role of the AI Council can address so many of the things that we've talked about. It's not a panacea. There aren't any panaceas here. We're on an adventure. It's a rocky one. So you're going to run into, little decision-making, problem solving, politics, drama, big feelings. However, an AI Council provides a forum for those conversations to go to. So each employee will have a peer who's on the AI Council, right? The AI Council can have conversations without the C-suite in the room, right? The AI Council can set up, build-a-thons, hackathons, or whatever. The AI Council can recommend to the CEO that we give everybody 3 days home and a learning journey for AI, so they're not trying to learn in their like little tiny moments between meetings, like 4 minutes or something that people might have. So that group can factor in the use cases of all the people in the AI Council, as well as those they know. They can really reflect on how these might bump up against some of the organization's values and begin the process of putting together a framework here for guidelines and policies and protocols. A lot there is like working, a lot of work with AI councils is shown to be effective in lots of organizations now, and that's what I lean into. I'm seeing good results from it. Again, no panaceas. And then the other thing about that is, that downloading a policy from somebody's website is not AI governance. That is not a thing. I know that we have lots of consultants and lots of thought leaders and lots of professionals out here saying, well, I have an AI council on my website. You can just download it. That's not how this works. It's people, process, and culture. Okay, with that, wrap up thoughts. Marn, Dawn, Valerie, a nugget, something you want people to walk away with from this?
Step into it. You can do it. Take that first step. Find a friend and just do it and have fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Dawn.
Who's not in the room that needs to be? You have to remember there's somebody in your entity that has to be in there, be it a privacy officer, a black belt user, somebody fairness but hasn't spoken up. Remember who you're skipping from the conversation and make sure that you include them.
Dawn, A+, so good. Valerie.
I would say adopt a curious mindset. So curiosity about yourself, your learning, others, their perspectives, just embrace it because it's changing.
Yep, absolutely. So for those of you who are still hanging around a couple minutes past the hour, this session here was brought to us by the Create Conference. In the upper corner, left-hand corner, at least my left, there's a QR code. If you point your phone at that, when you've got your camera open, it'll take you to our application for speaking and to let us know you'd like to volunteer. Our conference is in Salt Lake City on October 11th through 13th. All right. I know everybody's got to hop. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to my co-hosts. Thank you to the folks in the chat. It's delightful to have this conversation with all of you, and I'm grateful to be in your presence. Have a beautiful rest of your day, everybody. Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. Bye.
Thanks, lady.